Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the SoDA Series Live. We appreciate you being here. I'm Tom Beck. I'm Executive Director of SoDA, and I'm flying solo today. My co-conspirator and friend Kristen Bell from Adobe is out today, so forgive me for having to take this solo. We miss Kristen, and hello if you see this on replay. The SoDA Series Live, if this is the first time joining for you, the SoDA Series Live is a monthly live stream conversation between Adobe and a design leader from within the SoDA community. We talk about trends, practices, challenges, tribulations that are top of mind for creative leaders around the globe. And for those of you who don't know SoDA, SoDA is a global membership-based community for founders and leadership teams of primarily digital design studios focused on innovation, experience design, and what's happening next in the industry. So we're looking forward to a great conversation today, and again, really appreciate you being here with us. I'd like to first introduce the fearless leader of our discussions, Talon Wadsworth. Talon is a principal designer at Adobe, and I was just realizing, more than 2 years we've been collaborating on this series together, and I finally got to meet Talon in person at Adobe Max last week after 2 years, which was amazing. And I can tell all of you out there who are watching that Talon is taller and even a little bit more handsome in person than he is on screen.
No, you stop.
So welcome, Talon. It's awesome to see you, Tom. And it was really a pleasure to finally meet in person.
It was. I can't believe. I mean, I think we are all living through that kind of like COVID fog in our brain. We're like that. It was a period of time that happened. It was how long it was, we don't know. And yeah. For you to put it out there. No, we've been doing this for like 2.5 years. Is mind blowing.
I feel like I know you really well. And look, this is the case. It happens with a lot of our members sometimes because SoDA is a global community. So a lot of our members who come into the organization that might be in far-flung markets, I may not meet them in person for, we'll say, up to a year. But I'd say, man, almost 2.5 years now. That's probably the longest stretch I've gone with someone I consider to be a great colleague now and a collaborator. That's a long time to go without meeting in person. So it was really nice to have.
It is indeed. And here's to many more opportunities in the future for us to do that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And for our guest today, I'd like to introduce Damian Hanley. He's the executive director of a longtime SoDA member in the company of Huskies. The Huskies are an integrated creative agency based in Dublin, and they do a lot of amazing work for global brands like Nissan, Guinness, Allianz, and more. And we're thrilled to have Damian here with us today. Hey there, Damian.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. Well, so for those of you who joined us through the live stream, I'm going to drop off camera and I'll be in the comments section within LinkedIn. Following your comments and questions. So if you have questions, go ahead and pose them there, and I'll make sure that I surface them to Damian and Talon to address in the course of their conversation. So have a great discussion today, and without further ado, I'll turn it over to Talon.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Damian, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm so happy to be meeting you here, and hopefully we'll have a great discussion. I know we will. Anytime we have get to talk design, it's going to be a good discussion. So thanks for being with us today.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay. And I got to say, Tom mentioned Dublin. I had my first chance to go to Dublin last year. And if anyone out there in the audience has never been to Dublin, I highly recommend it. We had just a phenomenal time in Dublin, myself and my family. So next time I'm in town, I will definitely hit you up and maybe we can go grab a drink or something while I'm there. Oh, Damian, are you with us?
I'm just maybe having a second here, please.
No worries. Are you back? Well, while we're sorting out some technical difficulties, I hope you're all having a great day out there. Maybe if you're there, I recommend later checking out some of the. Oh, you think Damian there? No, he's not there yet. Oh no! But you should all go check out the sneaks from Adobe Max that was just 2 weeks ago now. There was some mind-blowing technology on display, also as well as the keynote. You should go check those out. There was some really amazing generative technology being shown off in Illustrator and Photoshop, so definitely go check that out. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of it. Damian, are you with us?
I am. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened there.
Oh, no worries.
Keep going there, Tom.
All right, I was feeling some time, just telling everybody about some of the cool things I saw, that they should go check out from Adobe Max. But Damian, pleasure to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. So, I always like to kind of start off the conversation by getting a little background on yourself and kind of your journey, coming into, being a designer, design leader. What's your creative journey been? Like, tell us a little bit about your history and kind of how you come to be there at Company of Huskies.
Yeah. So thanks, Tom. So I'm probably slightly more different to your usual guest in that I've come from not a design background, but so I came through the traditional agency route as an art director, and so I suppose very briefly, and this is interesting in terms of what I'll be talking about in a minute, but so as I say, I came through very traditional kind of BBDO. Sorry, these are brilliant agencies, obviously, but it was just more that kind of traditional route into art direction and Havas, and then in about 2006, I joined an agency in Dublin here called Rothko, which eventually became Droga 5 when Accenture bought those over. So I've pretty much been around kind of the big kind of brand art direction concept and my whole life. And I joined Huskies, in the company Huskies, about 9 years ago at the start of 2015. And I've kind of had an interesting journey in terms of, the theme for today is about kind of collaboration and kind of mashing the worlds together. And really, I suppose, to put it very brutally, I kind of represent that kind of traditional big brand agency side thinking, and across town, in the company Huskies was there, and they were like Ireland's first digital agency. Actually, if you see my cap there, established in 1999, I'm on brand today, but they were called Cybercom, which was like a bad 90s movie, and they kind of rebranded back in sort of 2013 because the pure play digital market was starting to sort of falter a bit in Ireland specifically because clients were not coming to agencies just specifically for digital projects. You needed to have a broader offering. So for example, when I was in I'm going to call it Droga 5, we were working on a huge bank called AIB here, and we were doing the kind of the brand kind of TV ads, posters, all that, and then Huskies had the digital end of it. So we were kind of, I suppose, the lead agency. We're working with them. But it was a classic kind of bit of a mess because we essentially were across town trying to think up the big kind of brand idea. They were going, when you have the idea, will you come down and give it to us so we can actually, it was very kind of 10 years ago. And and so eventually, invariably, we'd end up giving to them way too late. They would struggle then to sort of do the matching luggage thing across the channels and try and design up kind of various assets. And then the person who kind of missed out most probably was the client, in terms of this is the thing they joined up, And what actually happened was that Jonathan Forrest, who set up Huskies all those years ago, began to talk to me about coming over to Huskies as a creative director. And my initial response, to be honest with you, was no way, thanks. But then over the course of a year, I was like, this is interesting because we had tried to bring in digital into back then it was called Rothko, and with varying success. And what I started to realize was maybe what's an easier route is to actually put someone who understands traditional over into, because for me, the digital end of it was quite complicated, but the brand and the agency side was actually very simple. Whereas if you're trying to plug digital into a traditional agency model, it's actually very, very difficult.
Much harder. Yeah.
So it was a really interesting trip. So I'll stop talking for a minute, but I can talk more about that in a minute. But it was just that was an interesting kind of way of approaching it.
You know, before we came on the live stream here, you and I was sort of discussing with you how, as I've sort of started to interface and interact with a lot of the leaders like yourself at these digital agencies, the thing I love most about it is that the digital agencies have really been on the cutting edge of those kind of evolutions, right? My background is one where I think I always approach the problem in a much more holistic way, and I didn't come through the agency world. I came from more of a traditional design studio, sort of service-oriented background. But that was our approach. Our approach was much more holistic, and we were sort of selling kind of that whole end-to-end package, as it were, to our clients. And that trajectory is fascinating to me. And I think a lot of people maybe who are now just kind of coming and getting started in their careers, haven't really been exposed to that trajectory where things were optimized and a little more compartmentalized as it came to the execution of a project for a brand, for a global brand in particular, where work would be pieced out to different agencies that had these specialties. And so I think it's really fascinating that you saw that the agency you were part of previously having trouble trying to integrate in these new models into this old model of agency work and brand work. Instead, like you were, I think and digital company of Huskies were on that cutting edge and actually bringing you over and approaching the digital work in a much more holistic way. So it's a fascinating journey. Talk about your role as a creative director and particularly coming from the brand side. What was it about the brand that you were hoping to bring to the digital side and start to integrate much more kind of holistically into that process?
I suppose what and I should say, by the way, Droga have solved that problem and are fantastic. That was just a period of time, right? Just
yes, indeed, yeah.
But this is a long time ago now. But what I should say is, I do think what traditional agency background does teach you. I'm not saying this doesn't happen but you end up being trained to think about what actually is the problem, rather than jump straight into solutions. And we've all heard when you have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And the one, and look, I'll knock my way of thinking in a minute now, but the one thing that did occur to me about the approach of kind of digital agencies, and certainly Huskies back then, was I did feel like I have an idea, let's do a content program. And you're going to go, that's actually not an idea, that's an approach, I think digital agencies were actually committing the same crimes that they were accusing that traditional agencies of, which was when you have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And, whereas traditional agencies used to reach for that big TV script and the posters, digital agencies would invariably reach for their own toolbox, whereas in actual fact, the answer, surprise, surprise, lies somewhere in between those two things, And as I say, the only people who were losing out there was the client, because it was almost like, when you guys stop having this kind of really boring discussion about who's more right, can you just come back with an answer that actually the person in the street cares about? And and as I say, so really what I was hoping to bring over to Huskies was my kind of skill set, which was an understanding about, well, hang on a second, what does this brand actually stand for? What's it trying to do over a 5-year period? What's its actual purpose? What's the insight? I'm not saying, but it just that wasn't as much a priority, I think, because so what I brought was that kind of understanding of kind of long-term brand thinking. And I also then managed to hire a lot of kind of classic kind of creative people who were more tuned into the new world. They just grown up with it, it just became more natural for them. It was as natural for them doing Facebook and Instagram ideas as it was doing outdoor. They just grew up with that. And what Huskies had that I saw was a completely fundamental understanding about how that whole world works. So I felt, you know what, I can actually come in over that. And it was very difficult for a start, to be honest with you, because it was like, and Dave Hayes, who was supposed to be here today, kind of totally represents that world. And myself and Dave, and he would say the same thing here. I mean, it was like, you know, when mommy and daddy are stopped fighting, you know, can we all get on with the work? You know what I mean? And it was us trying to just clash those two things together. And it was bizarre, because what I used to say to the creatives is, when you come into the room, turn left occasionally, like go down that end of the building and chat to people and stuff. And the first couple of years was very tough, actually. And we had to go through the pain that a lot of agencies were going through over a much long period of time. We had to go through in a very short space of time. And I suppose, to our credit, thankfully, we actually managed to get through it and come out the other side, you know, and I think we were an awful lot better agency for it, you know, whereas I think other agencies never actually managed to get there. Other agencies which had kind of bought a small digital agency and said, well, that's that problem solved. I've seen those things completely fail in real time in front of my eyes. So I'm not going to say it was all a fairy tale. Like it was kind of very painful. It was very painful, you know, and as I was joking with Dave, you know, it was more collaborate than collaborate, you know, and you know, but I think we got there, you know, and we've learned huge lessons from it, which I'll probably talk more about now.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it shows up in the work. You know, like, so I've dedicated here at Adobe a lot of the last 10 years really to thinking about like how people work together, you know, and collaboration really is one of the hardest things. Like execution is the easy part, you know, but the mix of trust and you know, innovation and, you know, that push and pull, you know, of these different sort of areas of expertise coming together can really create something pretty magical at the end of it, right? That can deliver something for the client that really raises the bar. But like getting there, like that's the hard work, right? I don't know if I was just thinking about like, what were some of the strategies that you tried? Like you mentioned kind of like encouraging people to kind of like go left or like just go and interact with those other groups of people. But what were some of the strategies that you all employed, you know, over the years to try and get your different groups, maybe some of those specialty teams to really start to not just collaborate, but start to see what they're doing in a different way, right? The way that they were maybe working day to day. Like what were some of the strategies that you employed as you were, again, by building and designing an agency is as much a design problem as like designing for a client? Yes.
So I'll do a simple one first, which was, I mean, I think DTB or Dole Bernbach did the obvious one where they put the copywriter with the art director, you know, and there hasn't really been such a big innovation since then in terms of the creative kind of process up until about 10 years ago. And what we did was, I suppose you've all heard the expression, which is it's rugby. I know this is largely American audience here, but it's more rugby than relay. And in the old days, it was like client, the brief to the creative department, back to the client service, and that worked very well for 20 or 30 years, but it doesn't work well anymore. And one of the things we did was we started to put groups of kind of connection strategists, people from the digital department, traditional kind of copywriter, art director, into rooms actually, and just said, can you have a conversation for a few hours and then come back again? And I don't believe, by the way, in brainstorming. What I do believe is caves and campfires, right? What I mean by that is people to sit around a campfire for a while, and then you have to go into their cave and do some cave painting. And if you always sit around the campfire, you'll never do any cave painting. And if you always stay in a cave, you'll never get to meet anyone. So actually,
I love that.
Constant brainstorming and constant sitting in rooms doesn't actually work, in my view. A small bit of it works, then people actually have to go away and actually apply that thinking in some way and actually just be their brilliant self. So it's actually not constant collaboration. It's about understanding Okay, you sit around the campfire. Okay, what are we trying to achieve? Okay, we need to go hunting tomorrow. Right, what are we gonna hunt? Right, Grant. I'm gonna go into my cave now and start thinking about how we're going to do that, and I'm going to come back to the campfire. That's actually, in my experience, the most efficient way to work. So, but if you sit around endless meetings and people throwing in ideas, what will actually happen is everyone will feel very good about suggesting ideas, but no one actually does anything. And that's equally destructive, actually. In fact, that's actually more destructive than not collaborating at all, because no one actually does anything. At least in the old way, people actually come back and actually do things. So really what it is, it's actually a combination of those two gears. And you let that group kind of go away, have a chat, go away, come back, go away, come back. Sorry, that might sound obvious, but
no, I don't think it is all the time. And that's why I kind of asked the question, is that, I think that oftentimes the efforts, the creative practice is often seen as kind of a solo initiative, right? Like it is kind of seen as like you're the creator, you're going into your cave and you're going to create this thing, you're going to come out and show it to the world, and it should be perfect and everyone should understand it. But the things that we do, especially in the digital space, are so complex. It really requires bringing together people with many different capabilities, right? Some of the best things I've ever done were actually in collaboration with some of the smartest people I've ever known, our engineering organizations, right? And it was you sort of, with that analogy, you really perfectly described the process that I'm a big, that I espouse, here with my team, which is that, building that familiarity with one another and having that mutual respect for what everyone's bringing to the table really unlocks the potential for, again, like if you got to create the space, the fire pit, where the campfire is going to be, you're going to create that space, got to bring people together. And then once you get that kind of cross pollination, then it makes it so much easier then to trust that the person's now going to go off into their cave and, with the best intent, and they're going to come back and really respond to the problem and come back to the fire with something that's probably, again, better even than the sum of its parts, right? Like it's a 1 + 1 = 3 kind of equation when you start to create that kind of environment for your teams. And it does seem simple, but it's really hard to do, so.
No, you're right, and everyone needs a chance to do that. Everyone needs a chance to go away and go, look, here's my interpretation of what we did, and as I say, it's fine for someone to go into a cave for like 2 or 3 days. I mean, everyone has to do that, regardless of who they are, whether literally at any aspect of the business. Someone has to go away and go, like, what's my view on this, and then bring that back. It's when it goes on for 2 weeks is when the problems start, and then it's the X factor moment, and then everyone gets, oh shit, now we're like 2 weeks down the line here, and it hasn't actually moved on. But there's another actually thing. It's another point actually I'll make before I forget, which is that the client actually. I often say it's the clients in pitches, but which is the client actually is not the client at all. They're actually an extension of the agency, and the actual client is the rest of the business who only have a passing interest in marketing and design and whatever it is those guys doing down there with the crayons, the board of management, the people, and actually the way we try and say to our clients is, look, you're actually not our client. You're kind of an extension of the agency team here. And let's work together to try and convince the rest of the business that this is what we need to be doing. And that actually is an incredibly powerful thing to do, because not only is it just people in the agencies collaborating across, you now have a client who feels part of the team. And the actual client then, as I say, is the extension of that business. It's all, because, businesses come in and they work with design and advertising. It's only about 15% of what they do, if even, and they just go, okay, right, show me the work. I'll go back to my Excel spreadsheet, and they're the people who ultimately are probably making a decision, who release budgets, who don't really understand it. And what you need is the marketing department, or the person on that side of the fence, to feel like they're actually part of the agency. And if they feel like a client, it's not a good thing.
Yeah. Just to extend the analogy, you've sort of invited them to the campfire, and you hit on it exactly when you were, as you were getting there. I was kind of anticipating that kind of analogy, because you're right, like making them feel invested and feel a part of the team can really change the interactions and really change how they respond to the work and how they go on that journey. And maybe end up again with a result that maybe they didn't even expect, right? And that's another kind of leads to like another question I had for you, which is as Huskies really brought you on and they wanted to kind of offer with their services something that was not just here's the digital experience, the website, the app, or whatever, what have you, but really now included like how it fits into the larger brand story. Like, what was that conversation like with those clients in the early days? Because again, a lot of the times, like clients, whether that be the people you're interfacing with directly, that you want to bring in a little closer to the process, or that larger entity, are they sure what they want even when they come to an agency? Like, how do you tell that story of what you have, what your services, are on offer, and then how you explain the value and kind of convince them like, hey, no, we're not just doing your website, we're addressing this in a much more holistic way. Like, what were those conversations like in the early days?
I mean, it was incredibly challenging. And it was a very unusual situation for me because when I joined here, clients would go to pitch. Let's say a big bank would go to pitch, or a big insurance firm or a car firm, and we would like to pitch, and they would go, well, you've no brand experience, so what we're going to do is we're going to pitch to the agency for the brand experience, make them the lead agency, and then they'll let you know then what the campaign is, and then you can go off and do some digital stuff on top of that. That was basically the conversation, and we spent 2 years trying to get on these pitch lists. And really, what it is the dangerous thing is if you don't own the strategic relationship with the client, it leaves you in a very, very weak position. And this goes for every agency, if you're pure design, that's okay actually, because if you're pure design, what actually happens is the clients go direct to you anyway. They just go, look, we have this. It's very specific brief. But if you're in kind of that kind of communication design service type of thing, you can be put in a very, very difficult position because you're thinking, well, here's what I need. Here's what I think we need to be doing. And in fact, the whole idea actually needs to come from this design experience actually, rather than the communication experience. That conversation will never happen because you won't even have a voice in the room. So what we tried to, we came up with this whole approach called pull, not push, right? And so we started to say to clients is, look, if you don't do stuff that pulls people in or pulls people towards the brand, you're going to have to push it with stuff. And that stuff is usually money and lots of media space. But if you do things that pull people towards the brand, that's actually going to be more efficient and more satisfying for those audiences out there. And really what pulls people towards a brand is not just doing advertising or communication. That can work, obviously, the stuff that, brilliant ads out there, you see it all the time, but also the digital experience online, how things look. Do I feel attracted to this brand? Do I like it? Do I look? It's human beings. It's not just what you say, it's how you look, it's how you act. Brands are exactly the same. And that began to really get some traction actually. And brands started to understand, okay, I kind of get it now actually. Maybe I just need to start thinking about this in a holistic fashion. Everything a brand does communicates. It's not just communication. And that actually was the thing that actually started to sort of get us an audience in the room. And then we began to win pitches, and then off you go, of course. So it's really important to have a story about why you should have a voice in the room, or why design is important, or why your communication is important, or what it is you're trying to ultimately achieve. What's the ultimate objective. So that was a critical point for us.
Yeah, no, it definitely seems like it. And I think there is this element to that interaction with clients where clients might come in with a very specific ask to start with, but there is some awareness that they have that they're coming to the experts, and so like I said, being able to tell a compelling story like that, and to build up that trust from with the client and saying like, well, no, like if we're going to deliver this for you, like we really need to be thinking about like they said that pull that people feel towards the brand. Like it's not just about like putting something out there and communicating it, as many channels as possible, but really is about how that story resonates and it has to be in a much more holistic way. And these channels, these digital channels, are extensions, of that core story. And so I think that seems like a really, again, like building up that trust and like being seen as an expert in that space and saying, well, this is where people are, and this is the way you need to be communicating to them. Seems like it was effective in those early days. Even the struggle was there, but it seems like it's definitely paid off.
Yeah, and no, it really has actually, and in fact, there was a really interesting. Well, I'll let you decide if it's interesting, but there was quite an interesting story. We've had recently with Allianz Insurance, right? So when people think about insurance, they think it's pretty boring, and quite conservative, and it's all about the price. And what's actually happened over the last 5 years with Allianz here is we've had an incredibly good relationship with that client, and they are a brilliant client. And really what's happened is that we have actually done probably our most creative work with an industry that's kind of not known for it, and something I passionately believe in is there's no such thing as boring clients, just boring ideas. And really, so one thing we did in collaboration with the client was sit down and go, okay, we want to do a partnership with a kind of a charitable organization to see, how, because insurance companies are trying to find out how else can they speak to their clients, their customers. So it's not just like, here's $10 off your car insurance, which is and then give us a shout if you crash, which is a pretty unsatisfying relationship. And what they do is sit down and go, okay, hang on a second, we say we protect people. Okay, and every insurance company in the world says we protect people, but actually, in fact, they don't actually protect people; they protect property, right? But what Allianz did was sit down and go, okay, hang on a second, how can we actually demonstrate this in a real way? And at the same time, we were having that conversation during the pandemic. There was a huge spike in domestic abuse in Ireland. Now, it did happen a little bit worldwide as well, and it was pretty awful. And they were like, hang on a second, we say we're protecting people's houses, but actually a lot of the women and females inside those houses are not being protected. So what they did was we jointly with them decided to do a partnership with this organization in Ireland called Women's Aid. And we did a whole campaign about trying to support Women's Aid. And we went to speak to the survivors of domestic abuse. And what the team here discovered was that in fact these weren't weak victims. These women actually survived in this day to day and kept their families going, kept the kids going to school. These in fact were the strongest women in the world. So we did this whole campaign about the strongest women in the world. And it was every communication was paid for by Allianz. All the media was paid for Allianz. We did sort of digital content with fitness influencers who did these whole things about exercises, but in actual fact, they weren't exercises. They were actually techniques that women were using to protect themselves when they were being attacked. It was a very, very powerful campaign. But we, just last Friday, actually, we won an Effie Award, actually the Grand Prix. So the most effective campaign in this country in the last couple of years. And most important, well, not most importantly, but one thing obviously the benefit is that Allianz in their category were actually the least trusted before the campaign. Now they're actually the most trusted. So it just shows how that kind of collaborative nature between us, the client, an understanding about what it is you're trying to achieve, and working across the stuff that I'm good at, the stuff that Huskies was good at in terms of digital, and a whole kind of cohesive campaign. What can it deliver? And it's traditionally for a boring insurance company, which in actual fact are not boring at all.
They're not boring at all.
It's an amazing project.
That sounds amazing, and I think there's this really love. I've been thinking a lot recently. I read a piece on the role of mimics in our broader kind of mythology, and the role of mimics or mirrors is to have something outside of yourself that can reflect back to you, like your ideals, your principles, so you can examine it from an outsider's perspective. And I think that's really what you're speaking to here, where coming at it from a much more holistic approach, from a brand-centered and experiential approach, in a way, maybe aliens themselves realized they weren't a boring brand, and there was these core tenets of that maybe are the foundation of their sort of company principles or ideals, and then in amplifying that story can both maybe again help their brand, but maybe even help their company. Both sort of reevaluate how they see themselves, in the larger world.
Yeah, no, I absolutely, and often actually our job as agencies is not to invent an idea out of midair. It's actually to find the idea that already exists within the business, and that's actually what happened with Allianz. I mean, I went in and myself and the team went in and spoke to them, and I actually read a book that thick on Allianz, and what I discovered was that Allianz ensured the building of the Golden Gate Bridge when many others wouldn't. They also ensured the building of Charles Lindbergh's first solo Atlantic flight, the building of that plane. They actually ensured the building of that. So when I examined the history of Allianz, I was thinking, geez, this is not a conservative kind of boring kind of not willing to make. This is actually one of the most courageous companies in the world who actually have to put their money. They actually. I just think this is amazing. And when we repeated that idea back to them, they were like, my God, that actually feels right. But it wasn't our idea. It was just, we just went in and said, this is the thing that's in your company already. That's the idea, the thing, you already have it. And that's a really, it's kind of, I'm always surprised. And look, I'm not using this word. I always am surprised at some of the arrogance sometimes of advertising agencies to think, I'm going to sit in an agency and just look at and try and think up a whole new idea for this company. When actually, fact is, if you go into the company and ask them, they often have the idea in there. They just don't recognize it, and it's our expertise and to sort of that the thing that you already have. That is the thing you need to be talking about.
Yeah. Well, there's also something there, I think, that goes along with that kind of same approach, which is related to that. I only want to work with exciting clients, right? There are these clients out there, the big names in the world, and I'm only going to focus my attention on that because I'm sort of anticipating that solution or that result in a way. And instead of I think what you're rightly saying, which is well, what are we good at? What are our expertise? What are we bringing to the table? We can bring that to the table to anyone, to any company out there. And we can find the resonant thing in it for us so that we feel motivated to do our jobs well. But we can hopefully find the thing that actually makes those clients maybe see themselves differently. And I've ascribed to that, it resonates so much with me because that's something that I've always ascribed to myself, and also, communicate that to, whenever I'm talking with students or I'm talking to designers just starting out their careers, is that, there's potential really in any project. And the reasons why you should or should not do something, really should be based on something else other than the sort of surface level sort of, perspectives or sort of interpretation of what that company is or what that project is or could be. Well, it's automatically going to be better if you just give it your time and attention and your expertise. You're going to find something in there. And you're going to develop that idea and hopefully come out even better. Yeah,
100%. And actually, in fact, there's sometimes more opportunity. I mean, I get students in with their presenting portfolios, and they have ideas for Nike and Guinness, and they're going to go, "You're absolutely out of your mind." Why start at something which is start with something? I mean, one of the two most creative campaigns that came out in recent years is one for State Street Investments, right, which is Fearless Girl, and the other one was for Volvo Trucks, which F&B said no to about 4 times. We don't want to do another campaign for Volvo Trucks. So, who would have thought they're exciting brands to work on, right? But there you go. And so it's all about how you look at the world. Actually, it's all about how you look at the world, and I suppose giving your clients business. As I say, it's exactly that, Colin. It's just not saying, I only work on exciting brands. And actually, when I first started working in Rothko, we won AIB, which is a big bank here. And I remember trying to hire creatives, and a few of them kind of said, "Look, I'll come and work here." I couldn't. It was difficult to start, which is such a small agency. I'll come and work here, but I don't want to work in a bank because banks never do any interesting work. And 9 years later, everyone to work in the bank. So it's just really about attitude. I'm sorry, it's just the team in there.
No,
amazing. It's having the right people. It's having the right people around you.
Yeah,
it
really is.
That.
Yeah, and I mean, also, sometimes like those clients that might be overlooked, again, like they might be willing to do some really exciting or interesting, or maybe, like maybe there might be a little worried about that. I mean, I was, as you were speaking, I was thinking back to this moment where we were working with again, I don't remember the exact client's name now, but when I was at the studio, and we convinced them to do some really interesting things. And there was this moment when we had sort of like shipped the project, and we were sitting there stunned, looking at each other like, did we just convince them to let us do this? And then we just shipped it out into the world. And it was like the most terrifying, but the most exhilarating feeling I think I ever had at the studio that I was working at the time. And I'm always chasing like those kind of moments, like that's what you want. You don't want the predictable result. You want to do interesting work that really elevates the things you're capable of, but also what your client thinks is capable, right?
Absolutely, that's the opportunities are on the areas that people don't often look or don't expect, and to get stuff through the expected clients is sometimes way more difficult, and there's way more kind of layers of stuff to go through. So that's certainly been our experience here.
Oh, I love that. Well, I mean, there's a couple of topics kind of in this mix, but I was going to say, like, you talk a lot about like global brands, right? What is that? What differentiates the work? Like, what are your considerations, or how do you approach the work differently from, say, like like more of a regional, local brand to, like, say, the approach you would take with a global brand? Someone like an Allianz or AID or any of these sort of global brands that you've worked with over the years. What's different in the approach there?
Yeah. So what I will say is, this is a very interesting topic, actually, about, because there's a bit of a love-hate relationship with working with global brands, I think, globally. And I think a lot of creatives and a lot of designers who've been around a while, you tend to hear, actually, you know what, I don't really want to work in the global brand, that's okay. And because global brands tend to approach the world with a focus on efficiency rather than it's efficiency, right? And it's about, and I understand this, by the way, it's about control. It's about making sure that there's no kind of tricky moments, that someone doesn't make a mistake, that it's off brand, and that kind of thing. And just speaking frankly here, and I hope there's none of my clients in the call here, but you kind of feel like going to them going, well, actually, once you have a foundation of what you're trying to achieve, you should let the local markets interpret that in a way, trust them to interpret that, right? So if you try and control everything, you'd end up having so many layers of approval that it'll actually cost you more money, the work won't be good, and you demotivate your local agencies. And so the more it goes wrong, the more you'll try and hold on to things more tightly, and the more you'll try and standardize things, and the more people will be demotivated, and the more control, it just becomes this really kind of negative loop.
Yeah.
Where you end up having these really kind of one-size-fits-all matching luggage global campaigns. Whereas if you look, for example, what Snickers have done, which is they have this like burning campaign, which is you're not you when you're hungry, and then they've allowed those local agencies to interpret that amazing idea in their own way, and the work is just better. And so it's an interesting approach, actually, and I often wish that global brands, I suppose, would just let go a bit more. And now the one thing they have to do is just go, look, has everyone got a fundamental understanding about what it is we're trying to achieve here? Great. There's a couple of very, very basic things you have to go. We always have to be about fitness, or we always have to be about satisfying your hunger, or if it's a beer, it's about connecting with people. Okay, and here's the logo, here's the beer. That's it. Now go and come up with some really creative way about how that looks in your own market. I guarantee you that there might be, out of every 10 things they do, 2 of them will be like, Jesus, that's a car crash, right? You didn't, but 8 of them will be amazing. Rather than having 10 things that are a bit kind of ordinary, that they just have to put this massive media budget behind it and just basically like a snowplow kind of driving this thing across the globe. That's okay, they have the budget, but for anyone who hasn't got that massive amount of money, it just you know what I mean. So anyway, that I'm just kind of ranting here now. But
I really love that, because there is something, again, and I spend a lot of my time working at Adobe because I work on very complex problems, thinking about how to sort of elegantly communicate a system to enable others to do their best work. Right. And so there's a lot of what that you're saying that really resonates, which I run into as well inside of a corporate structure sometimes, where those layers of approval have a tendency to strip out all nuance or all elegance from the messaging, from the story that you're trying to tell, right? Just of necessity, right? Like nuance doesn't travel, through large organizations when you have all those stacked layers of approval. And there was just something really resonant in what you're saying about really distilling down or thinking about the problem from more of a systems. Again, that's how my brain's interpreting it, but kind of a systems perspective, where I've defined the foundation in a really clear and elegant way that now, again, can travel and pick up that rich nuance from all those different sort of regions or all those different sort of groups that are now sort of dispersed or distributed kind of across the globe. And so that was, I totally took away from what you're saying, like something that, again, like really resonates with me in my work. And I think, that fear, that the lack of control sometimes, again, can really strip away any chance for, like I said, like resonance or depth of, sort of messaging, brand messaging and experience,
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a question popped in there. Maybe I don't actually. Can you?
Let's see. This one, I was a little hesitant because I was like, well, I don't want to anticipate the answer here, but Ray Floyd in the chat was wondering like how you manage the middle time between those cool projects. But in my head, I'm like, well, every project has the potential to be cool. So Damian, take it away. How do you manage the middle time between cool projects?
That's an interesting question. I'm kind of feeling slightly envious of Floyd because or Ray, because I don't have eons of time to be in between those cool projects. I suppose I fight when I get cool projects back on the table. I think in these talks, you see people come on, you think like everything's perfect, and sure, Jesus, like their agency looks like it's absolutely working like clockwork. I mean, the printer's broken down. The clients come back and said no to that thing that's been approved like already 6 times. They want to go back. It's just like, it's the usual. It's I mean, agency life's a bit like war. It's like vast moments of kind of boredom and just like organization, followed by sort of 10% of kind of a lot of action and a lot of stress, and maybe some progress. So it's a tough question. It's a tough question, and
that is a hard one.
I probably squander it a bit, to be honest with you, and you kind of get lost in life, and it's a real moment when the award ceremonies come around again. You go, what the hell have I been doing for this year? And so I actually, do you know what? I actually don't know, Ray, what I do between those projects, but I probably don't do enough, and I probably should do more. So you're making me feel guilty now. But thanks for the question.
Go back to the drawing board. What?
Yeah, I wonder what you do, Ray.
Yeah, Ray. What keeps? One of the things I always struggled with is I used to love the start of a project. I was like in it, like when you're just in those early days of ideation and you just feel that energy and you're just like, oh, this is the best thing ever. Like every idea is valid, and you're just like throwing it up on the wall. And then I love the end when you're in execution mode and you're just like, we're going to ship this out the door. There it goes. And then it was always that middle time where for a long time, it just was like, well, what am I doing? And I think you kind of touched on a few of the things that sort of happened. Well, like, and we going way back to our conversation at the start, like making collaboration happen, making the project, go, working with all the different people. I think you do have to find and recognize that it is a valid part of the process. There's something there to actually dig your teeth and sink your teeth into and really develop and ideate on. Like, how are we working? Could we be working better? What about this new tool? Like, let's check this out. Like there are things within there that you can do and find satisfaction in that are different from, again, like the fun, exciting, anything's possible early stage, and then the satisfaction of finally shipping something out the door. And I know that's something that I had to learn over time and really think and change my perspective on, as I progressed in my career. So,
yeah,
I don't know, Ray, there's maybe something that might be there. So.
No, absolutely. I mean, so two things I'll say there, right? Is one is to keep the energy up, you have to draw on the energy of the people around you, and that's one I think is the one thing that's big. The huge loss from working from home too much actually is sometimes it's good to be around people for no other reason than just the kitchen chat, and we only come in like two days a week at the moment, but any less, I'd like to be in 3 if I'm honest, because you just pick up things from people, and I suppose I'm not just saying this because you're on the call, but certainly a lot of stuff that Adobe are doing as well is actually very exciting. Like, I haven't wandered down to the design department, and I can look over someone's shoulder, and you sort of think like, what the hell is that thing in Photoshop they've just done? It's like, and I remember about a month ago, some guy saying, look at this now, right? And obviously it's the thing where it just automatically generates the extension of it. And you kind of go, wow, that's incredible, and suddenly you're thinking, that's really interesting. Like, how can we use that for something? Or, and it's just about being stimulated about that stuff around you. Actually, is really interesting. And a lot of the guys here work with, they're messing around with 3D, and I'm actually starting to teach myself kind of After Effects recently, just to try and disprove the theory that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And in fairness, it's very intuitive. Actually, I'm having a bit of fun with it. So now I started thinking. So it's if you're on your own, the energy will drop eventually. But it's and in fairness, full credit to what you guys do as well in terms of constantly putting in place and testing things and then launching them for real. Like, it's kind of interesting because that's the thing. You start to think like, well, how can we use that selfishly to try and do something for our own clients? So that's been great. But I'd never see that stuff if I didn't have like 6 or 7 designers and they're just messing with the stuff all day because they're bored, actually filling the time between conversations with us.
Well, I always found like finding those little creative wins, along the way. Like, so like trying out a new tool, trying out and just like playing, finding and getting that satisfying creative win, especially when you're in the middle part of any process or any project, is always just so rewarding, and it breeds its own energy. Like, it just kind of like just builds on top of it. And again, it might have had nothing to do with the project you're actually working on. It might have been this little thing on the side, but like, again, is that inefficiency, or does, again, like, it has its own benefit, sort of an impact, on the work that you do day to day. And, on that topic, I was wondering, like, you mentioned After Effects. Is there anything else that like is really like keeping you interested or excited or, feeling inspired? And it could be, writing, like things that, books or articles you've read recently, or, anything out there, like said, like you're dabbling in After Effects, anything else out there that keeps you excited and interested and coming back to and motivated to do your work every day?
Yeah, I think it got. I mean, very, very quickly, because there's a question coming there. But I mean, I think it's important to keep. I mean, everything we do reflects, the friends we have, the books we read, all that stuff. It's important just to keep that as diverse as possible. Like, I have a 17-year-old son for a moment, and I go, and like what I find massively frustrating is that everything he absorbs comes from this screen in front of him, but actually, it's only one channel. I mean, I know it's a very big channel, but like, like he hasn't read a book in like a year, you know, and you kind of think like, you know, like just read some. I mean, my favorite book of all time, by the way, is it's called Longitude by Dava Sobel, and it's about the search for longitude about 200 years ago. It is an absolutely amazing book.
I love that.
But you know, it's important just to, you know, they're the things from unexpected areas that you need to keep. And let me see, what advice would you give a creative team who's shifting more towards a role in overall brand strategy?
Yes.
I think, funny enough, I would read a lot of the stuff. A lot of the older books from the classics in advertising is you know, like Work is really good. I'll say, you know, in terms of understanding kind of brand strategy, but also some of the writings from the older people in advertising. I know Ogilvy, David Ogilvy has, you know, divides opinion, but a lot of stuff he wrote a long time ago is still, I find it kind of still quite relevant. You know, just trying to, it's, I mean, again, just a lot of the books, I think, are just a lot more considered feeling about that. It's just trying to understand sort of case studies that are 10 years, that cover a span of 10 years. Like, I think if you look at stuff like what Dove have done over 10 years, Nike have done over 10 years, there's a big threat on kind of short-term stuff and short-term activation, short-term things. You learn more, I think, from understanding what brands do over a 5 and 10 year period than you will from what they've done for the last year. I suppose that's the best way to put it.
I think it's a great sort of a piece of advice. And I think, again, trying to see the bigger picture, trying to find those resonant themes and how they play out, not over one campaign, but multiple campaigns, and seeing what success looks like. I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
Well, Damian, we're here now at the end of our time. And I got to say, like, and I so enjoyed our conversation. And like I said, like we had an amazing experience in Dublin last year, me and my family. So I'm hoping we get back there again soon. And if we do, again, definitely hit you up and maybe we can go and grab a drink.
Please do. So, yeah, absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem. And great talking to you, Tom. I really enjoyed it. I hope that was.
Oh yeah, thank you.
All pleasure's all mine. So
thank you both for a wonderful discussion today. It's always fun to be in the background listening and watching a lot of the vibrant chat within the community, or within the comment thread. So thank you all for joining today. And I did want to mention just a couple things that popped for me in the conversation. First of all, I love that usage of collaborate versus collaborate, because I do think that just captures a sort of truism, right? Like oftentimes collaboration feels very, very forced and kind of imposed on us. And I think that it's like, it really feels like collaborate rather than collaborate. So I thought that was really insightful. Loved your observations about kind of pulling someone to the brand versus, you know, the cost of really pushing things out. And then I particularly appreciated the honesty and what do we do with that middle time? You know, I think we can all relate to it's almost like you get asked, what's your favorite movie? And you're like, oh no, I have no idea. But I would say, just to extend yourself a little bit of grace, or all of us a little bit of grace, I think that there's a big role for having time that we don't accomplish anything. That's those white spaces are really, really important, I think, to how we operate as people, and certainly as creatives.
Thank you, Tom. That makes you feel a lot better.
Yeah, those are just a couple things that jumped out for me. But thank you both for just a wonderful conversation. We really, really appreciate it. And thank you all for being here today. And Kendall, if you don't mind, let's queue up the card for the next session. For those of you, if you're interested in joining, our next session is going to be next Friday, actually, November 3rd. And we're going to be live streaming from a live event in Brooklyn. But you'll still be able to access this session through the live stream here on LinkedIn. But we'll be talking about generative AI, moving from speculation to implementation. And we've got a really incredible panel set up with Mike Dobell, the Chief Innovation Officer at Media Monks, Ray Inamoto, the founder and Chief Creative Officer at I & Co, and PJ Pereira, co-founder and creative chairman at Pereira and Odell. So we hope you'll join us next Friday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern for the live stream. And until then, wishing you all well.